Okay, I think everybody's here. We have a quorum. It's after 2 now. Just after 2, so I'll call the meeting to order. Is there any changes to the agenda, Madam?
There are no changes to the agenda.
Any declarations of interest? Seeing none, approval of the minutes of May 17th. Partridge, seconded by David. Questions or comments on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor?
Carried.
Opposed? The motion carries. Delegation requests from public hearings delegations, we have none. There's no presentations, and we have 2 discussion items. And Lisa, I think I'm going to turn it over to you with your report. We didn't have an opportunity to have an agenda review, so it looks like you want to make some changes to some timelines for the Integrity Commission. So could you just give us a second summary of what you're looking for? Your suggestion?
Yes, this was direction that came from the committee to look at an alternative limitation period for the complaints. The limitation period that is in the bylaw at the moment starts on the date the complainant knew or ought to have known of the event that leads to the complaint. It's a relatively short time limit period of 42 days or 7 weeks, and there are no exceptions. Once that starting date is determined that they knew or ought to have known, then the 42 days run. These sorts of time limits, there are a couple of options of how to do it. They're done different ways. I was asked specifically to look at the Police Services Act and how it's done there. And there, the difference is the starting time is the actual event. So it doesn't matter that the complainant knew or ought to have known of it. It's the actual event. The trade-off, if you will, on that is you have a longer time limit running on it. In the case of that act, it's 6 months. Human Rights Code, another act that has that type of limitation period, it's a year. And you also have an exception of certain conditions in that. So if no one is prejudiced, if it's in the public interest, and I forget the third one, that's on page 3 of your report. And if the delay was incurred in good faith. So those are the 3 that, some other examples. So it's really before you use information. If you want to proceed with making that change, you would give direction to do that. And one of the other steps that has to be taken, I haven't consulted with the Integrity Commission at this point about making the change, so that would be further.
Okay, so at least right now it's 42 days from the date that the occurrence occurred?
No, from when the complainant knew or ought to have known of that event.
Okay. How is that any different from the date that the occurrence occurred?
Because it may be sometime after, before a complainant actually knows of an event that gives rise to a complaint.
Okay, and what you're doing is giving us what other acts say, the Police Services Act or Human Rights, but with no recommendation.
No, I'm not. Either one is used. You can see in the report that the one that we presently have in the bylaw is something that occurs in the Limitations Act. That's the type of deadline in a civil proceeding setting. There's not a recommendation. It's really, there's trade-offs in it. They have different results in them, so it's really up to the committee to consider them both and decide which one of them.
And just before I turn to the committee, have we had, I'm trying to recall what triggered this. Was there someone saying that they were out of time and didn't realize it, or what triggered this to go back to ask for a staff report on it? Do you recall?
I don't recall a specific incident. I know that Councillor Whitehead, who isn't here, was particularly concerned about it and had raised the specific example of the Police Services Act and to look at that.
Where it's 6 months.
Yes.
And 42 days is about a month and a half, or maybe a little less.
6 weeks.
Okay, back to committee. Any comments or questions on the report? We can just receive it, or we can take action on it. Yes, Dave.
My only concern is ought to have known. Now, in a judicial proceedings, that seems to be a bit of a gray area. And that's why I have some difficulty where you ought to have known. How do you prove or disprove that they should have known or not known at that time?
Lisa?
Through the chair, each of these limitations has a point in them where the evidence is looked at and a decision is made and discretion is exercised. That would be the point in the time limit we have now and the circumstances surrounding it would have to be looked at by the integrity commissioner about whether they ought to have known or not. If they refuse to accept that, they have to report on it. So he has to report on it. So in the second one, that decision is made about whether extending the time and whether those conditions apply or not. And the amendment that would be made would also require a report about the conditions being met. So it's a different place where it's a matter of the circumstances surrounding being evaluated by the integrity commissioner and deciding what to do based on that.
Okay, Judy?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I guess to follow up on what Dave has just said, I have some difficulty with the wording as well. I find it confusing, and I think for anybody out there that's wanting to participate in the Integrity Commissioner process, that it's not as clear and as cut. I always thought that it was from the day they registered the complaint. But I think what I'm hearing from you is it's from when they ought to have known about the event, not necessarily when the event took place, which was what the question was that you asked. So I'm finding it confusing. And the second part of that, I guess, is that I would like to have seen the comments from the Integrity Commissioner in this information report, just to have a more, there's good information here, don't get me wrong, but I think it would have been a little more fulsome if there had been some comments from the Integrity Commissioner. And I'm just wondering why, was it just timing that you weren't able to talk to him, that he wasn't available?
No, the direction was just given to legal to report back on it, and before going farther with it, my feeling was I wanted to just give you the basics of what two possibilities there are.
And I guess the question that I have is, of all of the complaints, and I'm not sure how many complaints have been lodged, has there been an issue around a gap in the timing?
Through the chair, I'm not aware of one. No.
Okay.
Certainly,
No,
the integrity
we're not aware of any
commissioner.
issue.
So it hasn't been an
And I'm
issue
not
to
aware
this
of it
point?
being, the integrity commissioner has an obligation to report back on you, make recommendations as issues arise to him. I haven't, through his reporting back, I haven't seen, but the only certainty in that would be once you run it by him, and that's a direct question to ask Mr. Bassett.
Any other questions?
Okay, no, that's it.
David, Armand?
Just building, through you, Chair, just building on Councillor Partridge's and David's comments. I agree, the fact that this has been highlighted for information and that there seems to be some ambiguity around the date, I think there is some value in considering clarifying that. So whether it's the date of the event, it's 6 months or a year, I think I personally would feel more comfortable if we accepted this as information, but staff brought forward recommendations. Following maybe a discussion with the Integrity Commissioner, getting his feedback, and then bringing forward recommendations back to this committee on providing more clarity around the date. I feel more comfortable with their recommendations coming.
I think the appropriate thing we do if you want to do that is to refer to clerks who Mr. Bassett reports to. When he sends reports to you, you bring them to council.
Correct, but he does not report to me.
No.
He files his reports through the clerk's office. It's a standalone position.
Okay, but just refer it to the Integrity Commissioner, that might be the right thing. I don't know, but it doesn't give any particular marching order to go do that, and you can talk about that.
We can notify him.
Okay, so we ask clerks to notify him and give his views on whether it's necessary to make any changes to this particular cost. And if you want to make that motion, I'll have to come back to you because you spoke to it, David. But any other questions?
No other questions.
Sorry, we'll forward the report.
Absolutely.
Direct.
Oh yeah, expect that. Hope you can have that debate if we have that motion come up. Joanne?
I just wanted to echo what Councillor Partridge said, that I think it's imperative to hear from the Integrity Commission first. And I also echoing what she said. If there hasn't been a problem, why make a change? But I'd like to hear from him. His opinion first.
I have one of the speakers take a chair for a second.
Yes, sir.
Something that I'm sitting here thinking about when this went through. It was very early in my political career. And I recall a big issue when I got to council was the fear that a potential candidate would make up something terrible about a sitting member of council to give publicity to it, to be able to make his life difficult during the election. And knowing full well that the Integrity Commission can't report back until after the election anyway. And so we put a sunset where I think it's either 3 months or 6 months before an election, you no longer can file. And I wonder whether this 42 days was plugged in partly because of that. If I can try to remember the back that part, it seems to be that may be how the 42 days rolled out. And I don't know whether, Lisa, you have any
Lisa, do you want to comment on that?
I can, that part I do remember, the 90 days prior to the municipal election actually came after the limitation. You always have to have a limitation on the complaint process, so that was in from the beginning. And there was some changing of the time from weeks, I think, to days to be consistent in the bylaw, but it was there from the beginning, and it was modeled on the civil proceedings limitation period that comes from the limitations.
So does the 42 days start to count after the 90th day, or after the 90th day everything has to stop? There's no more. So is the 90 minus 42 when you could file an application if the occurrence occurred on the 90th day?
It shall not be included in the calculation of the 42 days. So
that would be
32 sub 2. So the 42, if you're at 10 days, let's say you hit the 90 days before, you'd be frozen at the 10 days, and then it would start running again after the election.
So it's 90 days before the date of the election?
Yes. No complaints.
Right.
Yes.
Period.
Yes.
No, 42 days, you have to do it. If the complaint occurred on the 93rd day, you don't have another 39 days then.
Yes, you would. Sorry.
And that's where I think the 42 days becomes interesting.
You can't make the complaint, but the complaint, remember, is not, it's not set to the time the complaint was made. It's set to when it was known or ought to have been known. So if you knew about it, let's say 30 days into this 90-day period, the 42 days doesn't start running until the
After the
90 days.
election.
Okay. Because we're trying to avoid abuse of the system.
Yes.
Was the purpose of that. Okay, so I'll take the chair back.
All right,
And
back
is
to
there a
you.
motion then to refer
I was going to
this?
say, if you're going to go back to David for his motion?
If you want to make a motion, David, this
I'll
would refer to, through clerks, back to Mr. Bassey for an opinion whether there should or should not be any changes to the time limit set out in the act.
Yeah, maybe a modification though, because I think what I would like to see though as well is, that opinion is reflected back to the committee, but what I'd like to see is also a recommendation from staff on what that time period should be. I don't want the staff to come back, tell us what the Integrity Commissioner said, and then us having to go back again to staff to get an opinion on whether or not to change the date. I'd rather see both of them, frankly, in a report that states what Mr. Bassey, his opinion, but also staff bringing some recommendation forward to this committee on changing the bylaw. That's what I would like to see, and that's what I would like to put into a motion.
And would it be reasonable to ask Mr. Bassey to attend at the next meeting so you can ask questions?
But again, then we've already moved to the next meeting. So I would like to have a decision point at our next, if conceivable, at our next meeting on whether or not a staff recommendation on whether we're going to change the bylaw. That would be my motion. But within that same report, they can be separate. Whether Mr. Bassey wants to change or feels there's a need to change the bylaw on the date on the bylaw, they can be combined in one report. But I'd like a decision point at one time. I don't want Mr. Bassey's opinion.
So I'm hearing for a staff recommendation. Would that recommendation come from clerks or legal? Or would you rather stay away from a recommendation?
Through the chair, I think it would likely come from legal, but at this point in time,
It's a policy decision, isn't it? Not a legal decision.
I don't have, there's no information given as you've been touching on about choosing one or the other. They're both used, they're both valid. I think the part that this to me revolves around really is whether there's confusion about the wordings that's presently worded rather than the choice of one option or the other. And clarifying any confusion maybe about what the start date is at the time.
Okay, but I'm hearing the proposed motion would be asking staff to report this also. And so you would, I know legal's always been very clear to me, we also have policy, we interpret the law. And you know, could be a policy decision if we want to change or not change. And I'm not sure legal would write a report on a policy decision like that. And what you're suggesting now here is that you want us to decide, is the present wording okay, clear enough to us, or do we need to make it clear? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
I think I'm suggesting through the chair that there may be two different issues here, that the current wording isn't clear and causes confusion, whatever the approach is to the deadline. And then the second issue is whether to take a different approach to the deadline. On the wording, we can certainly provide a recommendation about how to make the existing wording clearer, or if you were to choose to have...
Are you prepared to give us an opinion today on whether it's clear in your mind from a legal perspective?
I can see how there would be confusion. I can certainly come up with a suggestion for clarifying it. I can.
Okay.
So that I can say.
So
I can't do it right here and now. I have to.
Okay, so back to you.
Go back and think
You heard
about
the
it.
discussion where
Yeah.
legal will be uncomfortable giving us policy recommendations, but they're happy to give us a legal interpretation. They can give us a legal interpretation on whether the wording is clear or not. But don't look to them to provide something that's different, other than to clarify the wording. And now, I don't know, just before I come back to you again, Rose, is that something that your department would be prepared to give us advice on from a policy perspective?
Well, as Chair, generally, it's council that sets policy. We can give you information and recommendations on certain aspects of it, but...
So you prepared to give us a recommendation then?
No, it will be the committee that will make policy.
And we'd make a policy decision, but going to where David's coming from, correct me if I'm wrong, David, you're looking for a staff recommendation on the policy. Is that what you're...
That would be my preference. But I also understand that there are different ways that different councils and committees they deal with these types of issues. My point is we've already had a brief discussion already on this side around there isn't clarity around the language used within the bylaw itself. Legal has provided us with a number of instances, precedent, whatever you want to call it, where different language is used, different time sets, whether it's the date of the event plus 6 months plus a year. I think there are a number of examples there that have been provided to us. It's really, I think it's a little bit semantical right now about how we make that decision. Personally, and I think Joanne's mentioned it, Councillor Partridge has said it as well, I think we want to hear from the Integrity Commissioner on whether or not, one, it's an issue, and two, he believes there's some value in providing some clarity. But, if that recommendation isn't coming from staff, but I'd like at some point for us to have a recommendation in front of us to make a decision based on either precedent or professional opinion.
So I think what I'm hearing is that legal will be prepared to give us support whether or not the language is clear.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing we will ask the Integrity Commissioner, does he have any issue with the wording as it currently exists? That could be before us next week. If he doesn't, then we probably simply receive it. If he does, then we can have a discussion and hear from staff about consequences of making and what the changes may or may not look like.
I am comfortable with that as in the form of a motion.
Okay, so your motion then is to refer this to Mr. Passy for his comments on whether or not the current wording is clear enough for him, and also to legal to provide an opinion on the clarity of the current wording, whether or not it's satisfactory. And based on those two reports back, then we can move forward with a recommendation and get coaching from the clerks on that. So that's your motion.
That's my motion.
Second, Councilor Partridge, she'll second that?
Yeah, I'll second that, and I'd like to comment.
I got your hand. Is there anything else, David, before I come on? Okay, Judy.
So just a couple of things. I'm wondering if it's being more convoluted than it needs to be. Is there any reason why the Integrity Commissioner can't make the recommendation to us. There's no,
It's actually part of his mandate to do that.
so then I think David's motion, as he originally stated, would be that the Integrity Commissioner makes the recommendation to this committee so that we can carry it forward. It seems pretty easy to me.
But that wasn't his motion. His motion was to ask the Integrity Commissioner, plus to get a recommendation from staff.
So a recommendation of staff, I understand that, but I'm just saying, to clarify that, I'm hearing that staff can't make that recommendation for all the reasons we just heard, so why don't we just ask the Integrity Commissioner to make the recommendation, and then we as a committee can make a motion to adopt
Okay,
it?
you can make an amendment, like I have a motion on the floor, which I
Yeah,
have to vote on.
I'd like to put that amendment forward if David's okay
Is it
with
a
that.
friendly amendment then? You just changed it to, instead of asking
Yeah,
legal also, you simply ask the Integrity Commissioner.
Yeah,
Okay, so it's been a changed friendly amendment by both the mover and seconder.
yeah.
So the motion is referred to the Integrity Commissioner for report whether or not he's clear on what the current wording says.
And as well, for legal.
No, I just heard you didn't want that part. So who's on first here? Because that was the original motion.
It's confusing wording, but I agree, Lisa said it, there's two components here. So whether it's an A and a B in the motion, but the wording does need to be cleaned up. It's
But
confusing.
Councillor, you originally wanted to do staff and the Integrity Commissioner. Staff says we don't do policy, but we will give an opinion on whether or not the wording is clear enough. That was moved in second, and then there was a friendly amendment to take it back to just ask the Integrity Commissioner.
Okay, so it is
So
going to
what-
be coming forward,
So
so I'm hearing it.
no, the new motion that was the friendly amendment was we just turned to the Integrity Commissioner and asked for his opinion on the clarity of that. But you
No.
want to change it back to what it was before?
No, so what we're just talking about now is the recommendation from the Integrity Commissioner on the length of time, right? Go ahead, Don.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe just to see where we are. I'd be happy to hear from the Integrity Commissioner. I would think, without talking to him, I have to talk to him, obviously, the person you want to hear about whether or not the current wording is workable in a way, because he is the one that has to make it work.
Right.
He has to make that decision, no, ought to, no, he has to weigh all those factors. He may come and say, I don't have any problem with that. That probably answers your question, absent any other complaints that we might have had about it. On the other hand, he may say, yeah, I have a lot of problems with that. I struggle with that every time I get a complaint. And he may say, if you can clarify that, that would be great for me. And if that's what he says, then I think there's a decision there to clarify it, and then I think we can bring forward options on how we would go about clarifying. So get rid of the no or ought to know, pick a date. There's a couple in the report, there might be others, and say, okay, the Integrity Commission recommends that it be clarified, because he doesn't like that language, it's hard for him. Here's one thing you can do, here's another thing you can do. We think they're both clearer than what you have. The decision as to which one you do.
And in your view, Don, who would make that recommendation with the clarity? Should be the Integrity Commissioner, our staff, or a combination?
I would suggest primarily the Integrity Commissioner in consultation with us, but it's the Integrity Commissioner that has to make it
So
work.
the right thing to do then is refer this to Integrity Commissioner.
And get a recommendation on that aspect.
First of all, you happy, yes or no? And if it's no, here's what you recommend.
Well, recommend change. He may not be able to recommend, I want 80 days or 90 or 100 days. Maybe he will, I don't know. He may say, I recommend that you change it.
Okay.
And leave it at that, and then we
Gotcha.
give you options on how to change it.
Councilor Partridge, you have the floor.
Okay, but I think the point is, we don't, as a committee, we don't meet that often. I think, I can't speak for Dave, but what I'd like to see is that we deal with this and it comes to closure and we act on it, as opposed to taking months and months and months and having reports continually come back before we finally get to where we want to get to, which seems pretty clear today.
Okay, so I'm back to you then. Can you give a wording that the committee could consider in a motion that would send this off to the Integrity Commission for his opinion, and if he finds it's difficult, that he consult with you and you come back to us with a recommendation? Is that what you're looking for, Councilor Partridge?
Yeah, we're looking for recommendations that we can act on.
Well, the wording is that you would request the Integrity Commissioner in consultation with city staff to advise the committee as to the clarity of whatever section it is.
Whether it's satisfactory, whether it's
Whether
clear
it's
enough.
satisfactory or not at the present time. And if it is not, that again, staff in consultation with the Integrity Commissioner come back with alternative limitation periods for your consideration.
Councilor Partridge, is that
That's
okay?
what we would do.
Yeah, I'm,
Dave, is that okay?
yeah, and Joanna's eager to
I
speak
got
here,
that
so I'll give her
covered.
the
So
floor.
Vanessa, I'm going to have you read that back. You can work with
I
it.
already have it, I can't do that.
Yeah. So that report LS 13001 be referred to the Integrity Commissioner in consultation with city staff to identify if current wording in section
It's clear now.
law is satisfactory. And then part B, should amendments need to occur, should it not be satisfactory, that legal staff provide recommendations for alternative wording.
In consultation with the Integrity Commission.
In context.
So Part B only kicks in if he says, yes, I would like it cleared up. Okay, Joanna.
I think it's probably covered in that motion. I hope so. What I was going to say is that staff should have a discussion with him, you know,
Sounds like they're going to.
and it sounds like it's going to happen now. So
Okay,
that's good.
anybody else wish to discuss this item? All in favor?
Carried.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, that finishes that item. So we're on now to 4.2.
Do we need to receive the report?
I think we referred it back to them, so I'm not sure we need to. On to 4.2, which is lobbyist registry next step. So just in summary, we have had delegations in now from Toronto and Ontario. Since our last meeting, apparently, the legal counsel has advised me that Ottawa has also put in place a lobbyist registry program. It's in its infancy, but I guess, or I believe, the council has passed a resolution to implement it, and Lisa has been able to get a copy of that. I was hoping as the chair that you could ask staff to prepare a report for us showing, first of all, from all three, Ottawa, Toronto, and the province, what their definition of lobbyist was, executive summary, what it says, and what the cost is. And have it to us today, but staff informed me very bluntly, very firmly. But as chair, I cannot request them to do that. It has to be direction from the committee. So I laid that out to you today. That's probably the right next steps, is that staff prepare a report or committee to provide those three things to us from those three areas, province, Toronto, and Ottawa. And then we can make the decision, forget it, go forward, create our own, and that would happen at the next meeting. I'd like to have that happen today, but I couldn't, as chair, couldn't request them to do that.
You want a motion?
No.
Done.
Okay, moved by the mayor, seconded by Judy. So the motion is that we prepare a summary of all three areas, showing the definition, the executive summary, what it says, and what the costs are. And I know in Ottawa it'll be budgeted because it's brand new, so they don't have actual costs. Discussion on that?
Yes, Chair, I just wonder, in the report that comes back, and I seconded it, so obviously I agree with it. I'm just wondering if staff could take into consideration what we heard from Toronto and I believe from Ontario Integrity Commissioner as well, was that they would be willing to share their software and whatever part of their process with us at no charge. I thought that's what I heard. So I'm just thinking when we're looking at the cost structure and analysis, that we include that in it. So Ottawa may be having to fund theirs completely, whatever they've designed their model to be. Maybe they're also, sharing into the provinces as well. I don't know, but I just like something around that.
The only problem with that, Councillor, is staff can't predict what we may ask for. And so I think the committee, in order to start the debate, needs that summary of the three areas in front of them. And then we got to say, okay, we like Toronto, we like Ottawa, we like Ontario, but we like this tweet to say X, Y, and Z, and then send it off to finance staff. Okay, what will this cost? And
Yeah.
once staff know what we're looking for.
Okay, and I don't disagree with that, but I think that somewhere in the cost analysis there needs to be what
Yeah.
Toronto would be willing to share with us.
What they're going to be
Yeah.
providing to us is hard data. What's their cost?
Exactly. Thank you. That's what I'm looking for.
Okay, further discussion on that. Dave.
Unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, you weren't here, neither with the three council, all three of you actually, but we do have a draft of the definitions. that was presented by legal back on May 20th, 2010. For definition for the registry.
That was
For the
before
laws.
this.
That's before
election.
this, before the
Before the delegations.
Yes.
Yes.
So my question is, what do we do with this? Are we going to scrap this now?
No, I would think at the next meeting, we could have that in front of us too.
That
Because
includes,
we'll send staff back with, either forget it, we don't want to spend that kind of money, or we'll say, we like Ottawa's, but tweak this part, or we like Toronto's, tweak this part, in a way of boilerplating it so that we can make it simpler. Or we may like some of the items that are in that report, Dave. That's where I would say, I just think we need all that information in front of us on paper so we can get our head around it. Okay, John.
My understanding is there had been previous agreement that we were going to have a lobbyist registry, and that's why that particular document was drawn up. We now seem to be saying maybe we're not going to have one. I mean, what has been done previously took into account that the decision has been made, I felt, to have a lobbyist registry. And now
There
it
is
seems to be in question.
we have a registry with 2 names on it, 1 or 2, Mark Allen Whittle and somebody else. So I think that the purpose of this is to determine how we can have an effective lobby registry and how we can populate it with lots of names, because there didn't seem to be any strong direction.
It was voluntary.
It was a voluntary situation. So I think the effort is worthwhile to proceed with in the manner suggested. Bring the information back and see what's the best way to proceed from here. Because a registry with 2 names on it as volunteers is not really a registry.
And one of them's not a lobbyist.
Right. So I'm happy with what we're doing.
Okay. The motion's before you. Seeing no more discussions, all in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, I think that concludes our agenda for today. Any idea when the next meeting would be, Madam Clerk, to know? Okay, David?
Sorry, just if I could, just through you, while we're on sort of the topic of next steps, and this is, I think, a related point. Council's more than halfway through the mandate currently. And
Council one that be?
Councilor is more than halfway through its mandate
Yes.
currently. And I think part of the point I think that Joanne and David are making is the fact that we have, while the information gathering process has been valuable, and I'm fully supportive of that, we haven't moved any further along to establishing what we're here to establish, which is a lobbyist registry, or at least a recommendation to council to establish a registry. I think in the way that we're moving forward, we're going to take those pieces of information that we got from Toronto and gathering from Ottawa and from the province. But at what point are we going to make a very focused decision around this is what we're recommending to council specifically? I understand your point around, we want to borrow and take certain aspects of what others are doing. But like at what set point in time are we going to have something in front of us that says that we can look at and make an intelligent decision to council to decide on this is the direction we're going to move in?
That's entirely up to this committee.
Okay, well, what I would like to recommend, and if you want it in the form of a motion, is that we establish a specific timeline around when decisions are going to be made related to those points. Around, when are we going to see a recommendation? When are we going to see costs related to that specific recommendation or series of recommendations? I just think my view is we're just going to keep going along, looking at different aspects of what we're tasked to do, and then we're going to get to a point where we're going to run out of time. 2 years isn't that far away, and then you get into an election period, which can start anywhere from 6 months to a year before, and then the business of council stops getting done at some point in time. Right? So I have some real concerns just about when we're going to really focus on what we're doing, get recommendations in front of us, and I would like to see a timeline at least an estimated timeline on what those decision points are and when we're going to have those decisions put in front of us. That would be my motion.
Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I agree with David. I think a timeline would be very helpful because it would give the committee something to focus on. It would give us something that we could move forward on. We've spent, we have a year and a half left. And basically that's it. We've got a year and a half left. And I would like to see this committee be able to accomplish what we set out to do when we started this process and get it done. Because if we don't, then we aren't any further ahead than the last term of council. We get through the election, the bodies around this table are going to change, and I would just, I would hate to see that happen without us being able to move the yardsticks forward. So my question through you, Chair, is who would put that timeline together? Would that be something that would come from clerks? So something that would come from legal?
Burke, what would you think?
Well, Mr. Chair, through you, we could, there's been some direction to bring some information. I would expect we could provide that summary in a matter of the next meeting, be it 4 weeks. I don't know when the
Makes sense.
committee's going to be getting together, 4 to 6 weeks, and we can have that. And then part of that information we could maybe outline for a committee, and you can make the decision maybe at that next meeting that you know, what you see.
Yeah.
Give direction as to what you want the bylaw to look like, provide some clarity on the definitions, and then we could assemble the bylaw, and it will go forward to the GIC.
Sure. If I may.
Councillor Partridge has the floor.
Yeah, I still have the floor. And that's fine if I'm hearing that it's going to come back to the next meeting, because you know, I hear what David's saying, and I agree. I would like to see some reports come back at the next meeting that actually says, here's your timeline that you had asked for, so we can, you know, we can act on it and have some debate around it. And then here's the recommendations that we've asked for. So we're making a decision that they go hand in hand anyway, and then we can move the process forward. So those are my comments, Chair.
So I think what's needed here is a response from staff in terms of the information they're able to bring back. Is it's reasonable to expect that in a month, say 4 weeks time, we could have this information. And then based on what's presented that day, we should be able to say, you know, we've got enough here to, maybe we have to, as you say, tweak some things here and there, as opposed to, oh my God, we've got a lot of reading to do and a lot of research. I think it's probably fairly simple to move ahead on a timeline once we get that information, because then we'll know what we're having to deal with.
You can never predict what the committee will do when that report does come back here, but I would hope we'd start to move down the decision tree. Either, no, we can't afford this, we're going to shut it down, or yeah, we're going to move forward. Are we going to copy paste the Ottawa one, or are we going to take a hybrid of Ottawa Toronto? And then direct staff to go off and prepare a draft for lobbyist registry and bring it back to another meeting for recommendations. Because if you try to shove something through to council on this issue that isn't crystal clear, they'll send it right back to us. And so while we want to have expediency, we also want to get it right. And we'll have a better feel for that when we see the summary of the 3 areas of the next meeting.
Specifically, I'd say, Chair, that if we're seeing the other communities with 3 FTEs and the $250,000, you know, there could be some real specific things that would cause us to pause how far we want to go down that road. But I think we'll be able to figure that out fairly quickly on the presentation of that information.
If we get their budgets, or not budgets, but what it costs them, we'll have a hard number right in front of us.
Yeah.
And know what to expect during our budget deliberations for this if we wanted to put this enhancement in place. Joanna.
I think I'll...
Okay. Dave?
I can say I'm frustrated by the process that's going on. We've been here a long time. I still recall my interview with the mayor's predecessor that we should have this done within 6 months. Here we are 6 years later, and we're still at this. And actually, Joanna and I are the only original members from the first round. So That's what I find it very frustrating, and I don't want to see this linger any further. And I've jotted some notes, I've made some observations. If you have a moment, I'd like to read them to you.
Sure.
Okay. From what I've learned after listening to the provincial lobbyist registrar and reviewing some of the issues at the City of Toronto, I feel the major drawback is the lack of compliance by both public servants, city and staff, and members of the public. To simplify the issue of members of council, I propose the lobbyist registrar bylaw be tied directly to the code of conduct for both members of council and city staff. This allows the Integrity Commissioner to operate the registry, investigate any alleged violations by member of council or staff, and resolve the issue under the code of conduct. As well, the Integrity Commissioner would also investigate members of the public who have alleged violated the bylaw upon finding the guilt, issue a warning, or impose a fine. Should the public violator fail to pay for such fine, that violator would no longer be allowed to do business with the city until such fine is paid. If the violation is flagrant enough, the violator would no longer be allowed to do business with the city for a period of time to be determined. Although some would say this is a dramatic and perhaps a heavy-handed approach to the issues before us, this doesn't mean it's a viable solution to the issues of non-compliance facing both the province and Toronto. Even what I'm proposing, there is an appeal process available to any violator under the Provincial Offences Act. I would welcome a judicial review of any proposed bylaw to ensure we are on the right path. I'm sure some legal minds would have an opinion either for or against my proposal, but the true measure of the bylaw will be in the courts. On May 20th, 2010, a draft of the definition section of the lobbyist register was submitted to the subcommittee. Therefore, we need to review and finalize it now. We need to develop a bylaw which would include these definitions. It should codify the offenses, procedures, as well as set out the violations and have penalties. Once completed, we need to return to the code of conduct for both members of council and staff and create a new section allowing the Integrity Commissioner to investigate and adjudicate in relation to the lobbyist registry, etc. We readily have a provincial and the City of Toronto's legislation, and now Ottawa's, regarding this matter. Therefore, I propose city legal staff review these statutes and come back to the subcommittee with the recommendations regarding changes to the code of conduct, outlining the proposed legislation for the lobbyist registry for council, staff, and public. This may appear to be a daunting task, but if earnest effort is put forward by members of the subcommittee and legal staff, we should have this task completed by the end of 2013. Those are my views and comments, sir.
So in essence, you're saying that the Integrity Commissioner carried a dual role, one being the Integrity Commissioner and be the manager of the lobbyist registry. Of course, we've got to get our head around what is a lobbyist and what they expect to do, or what's the employee expected to do, or, you know, all that has to be worked through.
What became glaring was that there is no process to investigate. There is no process for any violating. If you violate under the provincial, unfortunately I wasn't here for this Toronto's presentation, but at least what I learned from the province is there's no process to stop somebody from violating further violations, either council or the public or staff.
There's been, I don't know if the right word is convictions or no complaints on both sides, both Toronto and.
That's right.
But the bureaucracy you saw created was pretty significant, and we'll see that, we'll see the cost.
And that's why I proposed the Integrity Commissioner. It seems better to streamline it. He already has an investigative power deemed to him through the code of conduct and through the bylaw that brought him to the position. And I'm just suggesting that maybe a marriage between the registry and his position allows him both, again, to investigate and carry the process through to a conclusion.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor. Is there any other speakers to it? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Opposed? Had a few abstentions there. So, it just looked from the clerk's office, an abstention is a no vote, is it? Let's just have a clear vote. All in favor, please raise your hand.
Can we just,
Read the motion.
because I think
Clarification on the
there's no
motion.
secondary yet.
This was Councillor
I
Partridge.
can, yeah, I'll second it.
Yeah, moved by David Arbuckle and seconded by Councillor Partridge.
The timeline-based establishhed on recommendations and decision points can be.
How does that work? Can you say?
No, that's not the motion we're voting. The motion we're voting on is asking for the staff report. The staff report, the one that you read originally, we haven't voted on that yet.
Yeah, the staff report, which is to
Which
have
to compare the three.
all
That's the
three.
one, that's the one I'm
That's
voting
right.
on right now.
Oh, I had that as Mayor Martina and Councillor
Yeah.
Partridge.
That was my motion.
Oh, sorry, that's right. Yeah,
Okay,
Mayor
that's
Martina
true.
did.
Correction.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, okay.
So, go with the Rose.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, was it the intention to have that as an amendment, the timeline, or just as a direction to staff?
I framed it as a motion.
Okay,
But
I'm going
if
to back
we
to
want
that
to take it
motion
as
then. I want to
direction.
vote on this motion first, that we ask for the staff report.
As the mover of the motion, I would accept as a friendly amendment whatever the final sentence was regarding 2013. Well, finish that off again.
You want a timeline to come back when...
That was my time, that's right.
He's looking for a timeline when we can get this across the finish line.
And I believe it is
I'm fine with it as a friendly amendment to the report. The timeline
by the end of the
is
year, by the end of
established.
2013.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
David's comments.
Yeah. I would be happy to include that in the motion. So you read the motion again, and I'm assuming that it tags on the end of it.
Sure. Yes.
Uh,
We make it like a three-parter.
Okay, so that we have this finished by 2013?
Yeah.
That's your motion?
And,
Friendly amendment?
I think that's fair.
Yeah, I do too.
Any other comments? Okay, all in favor of that motion? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Any other business? Yes, Joanna?
I would like to see the next meeting set within the next 6 weeks.
Can we do it right now?
We've heard from the clerk
I have to
that
look at the calendar, but it can be done first week in March, probably.
Okay. You just don't skip into March break week, which is
No,
early
it'll be
March.
the first week of March.
So it'll be ahead of March break.
Yes,
Okay. So it'll be the first week of March.
I will put the pull up.
That'll make Joey happy too. Yes, David?
Sorry, just a point of clarification on David's points. And you'll recall that Lynn Morrison had mentioned the fact that she was looking for some investigative powers. There's been some changes to the Ontario Provincial Registry. I think she now has some of those powers. So maybe we're staff looking into the changes that were recently made to the
Are
Ontario.
you aware of that, Lisa, or is that something you want to check on?
Try, I read the announcements
Yeah.
of them, I can't remember what they were.
Yeah, part of it was around investigative
Okay,
measures.
that would be included in your summary of Ottawa, Ontario. Okay, motion to adjourn. Moved by Regina, seconded by David. All in favor? Carried.
Mr. Chair, just a moment for a second. I guess we're adjourned.
We're adjourned now, yeah. We can have an open discussion, but it won't be recorded.
That's okay. Any reason why we can't start developing some wording on the registry? In the interim, can we start things moving? You know, we've got 3 lobbyist registries on operational, or close to being operational. Can't we take some of that wording and start preparing it so it can come back to us to review?
But you've assumed we're going to do it. I think we got...
Well, I mean, let's face it. We may or may not do it, but we still have something to, we still have to know what we're going to do. Although you may say that it's too costly. No, we don't know that.
No, we don't. I think
We don't know what the wording's going to be.
That's exactly why we need this report back. And
But you know what, I'm treading water here.
my problem here is that the meeting's been adjourned, and I'm purposely not giving you any further staff direction because the mayor's left now.
No, I know we're in open discussion, but that's what I'm saying, we adjourned, but
That would have been a great question to ask while we're in session.
March.
Write it down for March.
It'll be
It's a
on
good
the
question.
agenda.
I think we're on track. I'm with you.
We just have to keep moving forward.